Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Welcome to lecture 19. This is the fourth lecture in this particular module. And in the previous lecture, we discussed about transfer of training, why transfer of training is important, who plays a critical role in ensuring that transfer of training occurs when an employee takes part in any of the training program. Today, we are going to talk about what are the factors which affect transfer of training, why it is becoming very important to understanding the factors that actually responsible for a transfer of training to occur in a workplace, so that you as a potential manager or you as an employee and you as a person who is responsible to conduct training program or going to go through the training program, you will understand, okay, how I can actually ensure whatever I spend my time in going through the training program, I plan a training program, how do I ensure that yes, there is a transfer of training occurs in my workplace, so that I can see there is an improvement in my employees' performance compared to their earlier performance. That's the main intention of understanding the factors which are affecting transfer of training. So today we are going to primarily discuss on what are the factors which are affecting the transfer of training, and we will also pay attention on, okay, how do we understand each of the factors from a larger view to a very specific view on each of the factors. And when we talk about the goal of a training, we've been hearing this again, but you should also understand the goal of a training is to provide, obtain and improve the necessary skill to help the organization achieve their goals and create competitive advantage by adding value to their key resources, who we are talking about is an employees. See, every time when we are in organization planning for a training program or wanted to conduct a training program, the intention is very clear. Organization wanted to add value by training programs. When I wanted to understand how does conducting a training program will add value, because I am trying to help my employees, or I am strategically planning to have a training program that will improve the knowledge, skill and abilities or competencies of my employees from one state to the next level of performance, so that I see that has been reflected in the workplace, through which I am going to add value for my organization in terms of better productivity, in terms of better product development, or in terms of having higher competitive advantage amongst my market players or with my competitors. So training plays a very vital role for transforming among the employees, especially when we identify, yes, my employees are facing some challenges in terms of performance deficiency, or are we looking at any potential threat in terms of market situations. How do I approach the market by improving the knowledge level of my employees? That's why training plays a very, very critical role. And now we're going to understand what are the factors which affect the transfer of training. We know that yes, organization have an intention to conduct a training program, keeping in mind that yes, it is going to add value, it is going to create a competitive advantage, or it will also improve my employees' knowledge, skills and competencies. But however, is it going to be ensured that when I conduct a training program, it is to be assured that yes, my employee will definitely show improved performance? It not always, unless otherwise you ensure that transfer of training occurs. It's like that. Now you are providing an input. This is the input you are giving, and you give this input with an expectation that there can be a desired output. Desired output is different from just an output. You are expecting some specific output to occur, right? The desired output now comes. It is not, especially in a training context. This I am talking about from a training context. When you talk about it from a training context, it is not always going to be assured that yes, you put this input and you are going to get this output. Not always, unless otherwise you ensure that there are transfer of training occurs. Unless otherwise transfer of training is not taking place, then employee, the resource you spend in training your employees may not be so productive or useful. So when we talk about a desired output, how do we decide the desired output? It is not about immediately after the training program. It is about after the training program. Let's talk about here is the end of training. end of training program. Okay, now talking about after this training program is over, am I seeing the desired output in my employees? Am I seeing an improved performance? Am I seeing the growth? Am I seeing the increased productivity? Am I seeing that my employee competency has increased? All this is what we are talking about a desired output. This is what, when we see that this is happening, increased competency, increased productivity, increased performance, then I am saying yes, the transfer of training was successful. So when we are talking about, we are interested in positive transfer of training. In the previous lecture, we learned about, yes, there are different types: positive, negative, and zero transfer of training. We are interested in seeing, can I create a positive transfer of training, so that my employees, what they learn through a training program, then they are coming and reflecting in their workplaces. Now we want to understand what are the factors which can actually, I am talking about this particular stage where we are talking about, okay, yeah, I am specifically talking about this particular stage wherein these factors which can facilitate after the training program, they are able to translate to their actual workplace whatever they learned through a training program. So there are larger level factors. There are three important factors which are responsible for a transfer of training, which influences the transfer of training to occur. What I said, yes, end of a training program, which I say end of training, to the actual performance, or otherwise call it workplace performance. Okay, so now this is what we are saying. Here what we are saying, these factors which we are talking about, these three important factors which will influence to have an actual performance or a workplace performance. What are those three factors? First is a trainee characteristics, which is about an individual employee or a participant of a training program, which focuses on their cognitive ability, and then also motivation in participating in a training program, and motivation to learn a new concept or improve existing knowledge level or a skill level of an employee. Then training design itself, yes, how the training is the program has been designed. It also talks about what is a training content, what is the method of conducting training program, what type of an instructional method has been used. Are we using lecture based, are we using job assessment, are we using demonstration, are we giving them hands-on practices? What type of an instructional method has been used, which actually going to effectively translate the employees learning to a workplace performance. Then the work environment, the very important factor which is going to act as a catalyst, that how the work environment is going to be supporting the training to occur, and also helping the employees who trained to come back to their workplaces and use what they learned. Are their supervisor being very supportive, or their peer provides support, and the organizational level resources, which also plays a very critical role in ensuring that yes, the transfer of training is going to take place. Let us look at in a framework. This framework is going to give you better understanding. So when you talk about a training input, yes, these are the factors which we are talking about, the input, and you see the training output. What is the output of a training? We are looking at the learning. My employees learn and they retain, which is about, yes, whatever the new concept or the improvement, whatever they are learning, it has to store and my employees has an ability to recall and use it in the workplaces. And comes the transfer of training. After my learning and retention, we are also interested in a transfer of training in terms of generalization and maintenance, which we discussed in a previous lecture as well. I'm going to discuss in detail again, but let us spend time on the input. This is what we are saying now. This input is very, very critical. So to create the training output and also to lead to the transfer of training to occur in the workplace. So the Baldwin and Ford have proposed this particular model, which they say trainee characteristics. Trainee characteristics, what is that? When I talk about a trainee characteristics, yes, it is about employee or a participant of any training program. So it talks about their cognitive ability, their own cognitive ability, their self-efficacy. It is the belief of an individual employee, whether they have a belief that yes, they will be able to learn and use effectively in their workplace, and their motivation to participate in a training program, and their learning motivations, and perceived utility of training. they should perceive that yes, this training program is going to be of a use for me in what I am doing in current job role. Unless otherwise, if somebody is not feeling that yes, I am feeling there is an utility, there is an use of participating in the training program. If you recollect the principles, one of the principles of learning which also say, immediacy relevance, where are they going to relate and see whatever I am going to be provided through my training module, is it of going to be some use for me in my current work role. So this plays a critical role in ensuring that my employees will show a lot of learning, and also they will transfer this learning to the workplace or a current job role he or she is doing. Now comes the second factor, which is a training design. So through training need assessment, you all already arrived at what is the requirement, what should be the objective of a training program. Now comes how are you going to design your training program. So are you looking at any behavioral modeling? Are you looking, if you remember social learning theory, wherein we talked about yes, you will have attention, retention, motor reproductions, and the behavioral reinforcement, which we are talking about. Are we going to apply of such thought that okay, are we going to do demonstration, are we going to ensure there is a behavioral modeling to occur, some role plays or effective way of training method, so that my employees able to observe, learn and replicate those behaviors or the performance in the workplace. Are we also creating a provision in a training module such a way that yes, a possible error when we perform particular job role can be seen during the training program, so that my employees become so skillful enough to address those error which can occur in their potentially can occur during their workplaces. And realistic training environments, are you going to provide a replication of the work context, or at least the job they perform, or they might the challenges they experience during the workplaces? Are you going to create the realistic training environment wherein they will have more opportunity to learn and use that to their workplaces or to the current job role? Since the training design plays a very critical role, then comes the work environment. When you talk about a work environment, this is about, if you look at this training characteristics and training design, which are very individualistic about the employee, and training design comes from the team which is going to design the training, where manager will be involved, a training department will be involved, and the experts or the instructor will be involved in designing the module on the program or content of the training program. Wherein if you come to the work environment, where it is kind of an organizational culture, organizational commitment towards creating the situations or a climate for an employee to have a better training avenues and also use those learning in the workplace. Transfer of training climate, as thus my organization promotes my employees to participate in training program. Are they going to appreciate employees to participate in any training program? Do they provide adequate support in terms of, let's say there are 10 people working in a particular team, if few of them have to go for a training program, does the other team members going to support in their absence? When 10 people are working in a team, if 3 of them have to be away from their work for the week time for a training program, the workload will be redistributed to the rest of the 7. So eventually that 7 has to be cooperative, supportive to allow them to go and participate in a training program. We are looking at are the company creating such an environment where the supervisor and their co-worker and peers will also support. Then opportunity perform, does my company is going to provide an opportunity for those employees who participate in a training program to perform. When they come back, are they going to create the opportunity to use the new skill, new set of techniques what they learned in a training program in the current workplace? And are they going to do a follow-up about how well they are able to recap whatever they learned and use it in the workplace? So these 3 inputs, which are very, very critical to facilitating in having a better learning and also leading to the transfer of training, which is generalization and maintenance. So let us look at in each of the inputs for learning and retention and transfer of training to occur. See, that training characteristics is one of the most powerful, plays a very most powerful role in transfer of training to occur. Why? Because unless otherwise the employees who is going to participate in a training, or in any individual who is going to participate in a training, if they do not have an intention or if they do not have the ability or efficacy, it will be very difficult for any training module or a content and organization to create such a transfer of training to occur. So the cognitive ability, yes, higher the trainee's cognitive ability, more success in processing, retaining, and generalizing the trained skills. So if the employee cognitive skill is really good, they will be able to quickly learn whatever been taught in the training program, and they will be able to apply such a learning in a different context in a workplaces, not necessarily an identical situation, maybe a very similar situation, they may be able to use it. Then comes self-efficacy. Self-efficacy is nothing but having trust and belief that yes, I will be able to do it. Higher the self-efficacy, they have more confidence in their ability to learn and apply the competencies, and they are more likely to persist when performing a difficult task. So if the employees or participants, if they have a higher self-efficacy, they will be able to become very confident, and they will assure that yes, I will be able to use this. And they show that yes, during difficult tasks they will use those skill set and prove that they are able to perform well. Then motivation. The motivation refers to the process of that accounts an individual's intensity, direction, and persistence of effort towards attaining a specific goal. So unless otherwise, employees do not have the motivation to learn, and it will become very difficult. They will be able to retain whatever they learned and transfer it to their workplaces. So motivation of an employee is very, very important. Are they showing motivation to participate in a training program? Is my training program is motivating for my employees to participate? For example, if you relate the need-based theories of learning, wherein we are talking about yes, individual motivation is subject to the satiation of the need. What level of a need my employees, if you recollect the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, five levels, where we are talking about physiological safety, belonging, and esteem, and self-actualization. What type of need my employees are having, does my training program going to provide them, that is going to motivate them to take the training program seriously, which will affect them on serious learning and also show that learning in their workplaces. Now, perceived utility of the training, as I was already explaining, unless otherwise my trainees do not feel that they are feeling that the training program will have a lot of value for what role I am doing. For example, if you are a person who are doing a software testing or a programming or a coding, and your training programs is absolutely on something else, and you don't feel that I'm going to learn something which is going to be useful for my job. So it is very important whether the training has some utility. When my employees perceive, they believe that yes, it has some potential for me to use in my workplaces, then higher the learning and higher the transfer of training to occur. It's more likely that employees will show a lot of intention to learn, and also show more intention to transfer that learning to the current workplace. Okay, now comes to the training design. So designing and delivery of training program has a lot of impact on learning and the transfer of training to occur. So when we talk about a training design, we are also talking about a content of a training is one, and then also what type of a method one is going to use to ensure my learners are able to learn something which are going to be interesting for them. When we talk about a behavioral modeling, so behavioral modeling will facilitate transfer when both positive and negative models are used. So for example, in this place you can refer to reinforcement theory, which we learned, positive reinforcement and negative reinforcement. What type of behavioral modeling are we going to use? If my participants show that behavior, how positively they are going to be reinforced? Are we going to associate some rewards or incentives, some scope for them to go back and create that in reinforcement to learn? And also error management which promotes transfer of training by allowing or making my employees to anticipate potential issues. Yes, there are chances of issues, or there are chances of difficulties or challenges when carrying out my job, and providing them knowledge with how to handle such problems, and also inform them what are the highlighting the negative outcomes of that can occur if the training is not transferred. So for example, somebody has been trained on how to respond to the customer escalations or queries, or any complaints comes from them, and if the trainee is not trained on different situations, what type of a complaints can potentially come, and that creation of that kind of a situations in a training place, the trainee will learn, okay, how do I handle if such queries comes. And also your training should say, in case if you fail to address such queries or complaints from a customer, what are the negative consequences, what will happen to the project, what will happen to the company, what will happen to the relationship between the customer and the organizations. That will have to be modeled a part of your training program, so that my trainees will show a lot of intent in learning the training programs. I eventually use it in their workplace. And training design should be realistic in nature. So many organizations conduct on the job training, and which takes place in your actual work settings itself. So where the trainees are provided on the job training, so they know that yes, they are already trained on whatever they are doing, which will make more realistic in nature. They feel like, yes, this training is more relevant for me. For example, somebody has to be trained on using a recent tool or a technology, and if you want to train them on a recent tool or a technology which they are going to use, and you give them the tool, you give them the particular technology, or take them to how to handle the new machinery. So if you are conducting the training on the tool, technology, or a new machinery which we are talking about, then it becomes more realistic in nature, because they become more confident. Yes, this is what I'm going to face in my workplace. I'm already getting more exposure in how to use the tool or how to use the technology which are going to be effectively used in my workplace. So training should be very realistic method. If you can go with a realistic method, it's kind of very similar to what the current workplace looks like for the employee. So that will become, that will provide more opportunity for employees to show interest towards learning and also use it when they go back to their workplace. Then comes the work environment. When we talk about a work environment, the following work environment plays a significant role. One is a transfer climate. Does my company provides a climate which promotes and appreciates transfer of training to occur? When, for example, when employees goes to a training, if they learn a new competency, does the current workplace appreciates them to use the competency they learned? Which means that my co-worker will support. Yes, if somebody learn new thing and then come on trying out in a workplace, and somebody has to appreciate it. Nobody should decline that somebody is using a new tech tool or whatever they learned recently through a training program. So that will indicate to the other employees that yes, my organization has a better organization climate which promotes transfer of training to take place, which supports the employees to learn and come back and use it in the workplace. And both supervisor and peer should provide a support to the transfer of training to occur. So unless otherwise my co-workers are not appreciative or not allowing to use, for example, somebody has, as I said this previous example which I was saying, 10 members, out of them 3 of them gone for learning training. So when they come back, these 3 will wanted to use whatever they learned. Now the rest of the 7, if they do not allow them to use the new skill what they learned, then what will happen over the time? These 3 people who went for a training will either never use the whatever they learned, or they never show interest to learn. So it is very important. The supervisor and peer has to ensure that transfer of training occurs by showing support and enabling and allowing employees to use in the workplace. Then opportunity perform, as I was saying, yes, the organization should ensure that yes, the trainees are given opportunity to practice what they learned in a training program. If it requires some resources to be provided, for example, you have some section of the employees went and learned a new tool or a technology, and when they come back, if an organization can provide them to supply with a new tool or a new technology in the current workplace, that will actually encourage people to have a very effective transfer of training to occur. Then follow up. To facilitate transfer, the formal training period should be followed by an additional training opportunities. For example, when a training period is over, after 1 month, kind of a reflection sessions can occur, so that they can go back and recap whatever they learned. Maybe after the training program, when they go back to the current workplace, they would have experienced some challenge. So they might go back to the reflection session and then say, okay, so I learned this in a training period, but when I actually tried to implement, I faced these challenges. So these review sessions will able to help them to adjust or handle those such challenges or problems arising out post the training program. So this follow-up will also help into ensuring effective transfer of training takes place. Okay. So now when you talk about learning and retention, as we already discussed about the inputs, now we are going to the training output. The learning and retention measures the trainee satisfactions remains over used effective means. For example, when you talk about learning and retention, which involves, what does it actually talking about? When you are talking about learning and retention as a training output, which is meaningful learning builds a pattern of relationship in the learner's consciousness. Is my training method develops a certain pattern on my learners when they are consciously building that pattern. One reasons to conduct the is scenario based training. Can you create a scenario based training? What type of a scenario my organization will experience? Similarly, you can bring that and then give them the opportunity to experience that scenario in the training period. And meaningful learning also goes deep because it involves principle and concept anchored in learners or students' own experiences. And it is also, if you look at rote learning, which is very repetitive learning, so or which is a reading or very conventional method, which is very superficial. It cannot be, is not easily trained. So the learning and retention goes beyond. You have to create more scenario based training so that my participants learning goes deep because they have to connect and internalize the learning. That's where the learning and retention takes place. Okay, now comes the transfer of training. When you talk about a transfer of training, two things which we are discussing are part of a transfer of training, which is about a generalization. What is the generalization? It involves the trainees, when they learn new knowledge and skills, are they able to use the learning or whether the improved knowledge skills level in different situations and also in a various other situations also. It is not always identical situation they are able to use it, but in a very similar situations or maybe something different situation they are not able to use it. So transfer of training should ensure that yes, even in a different changing situations, they were able to use whatever they learned during the training program, either their knowledge or a skill or a tool. Then comes the maintenance. It involves whether the trainee is being able to use the knowledge skills autonomously and also as a support system when the support system is taken away. Meaning that whether the KSC, which is a knowledge skill abilities or a competency which are learned during the training program, or my trainees are able to use it in a sustained period, which is a longer period. When I say sustained period, first few weeks of post training, you will have some supportive system from the trainer or with the instruction manuals or some, you can always go back and get some inputs. Even after such period is over, are they able to continue to use those new skills and competencies in the workplace? That is what it talks about, a maintenance of transfer of training. So the transfer of training is intended to focus on two concepts. One is about the generalization. Are they able to use whatever they learned? Not necessarily always in an identical situation in whatever they experience in training period. Are they able to use it in a very similar situations also? Next is about, are they able to use those learning over a period of time, even in the absence of support systems are taken away. So this too ensures yes, there is an effective transfer of training occurred in the workplace. So these are the reference. Today we learnt about, very importantly, to understand what are the factors which affects the transfer of training, because we as an organization, we are always interested that any training program has some very good outcome. Very good outcome we are referring to is, my training program going to create a positive transfer. The change which occur in employees post training period, which are reflected in the workplace, meaning that there is an improved performance, there is an improved productivity. Unless otherwise, if you do not connect the training to their improved performance, then what is actually happening? Only my employees went for 5 days training program and they had a very good time, maybe away from their workplaces, and they come back, and if it is independent of whatever different situation, right? The training is not linked to their performance, then the training is actually failed to deliver the transfer of training to occur. So there is always a connection of a training program to the improved performance of the employees, or at least change in their behavior, change in the way they do, the approach in which they used to handle such problems earlier than after the training program. So the transfer of training is very, very important. Organizations are interested to create a positive transfer of training, which expect that yes, after my training program, I wanted to see some improvement in my employee performance that will be attributed towards the training content and delivery of the training program. Thank you.